Hello, class. Welcome back to another session. Today, we're going back to my passion project, so to speak. Please don't tell the Foundation. They will black bag me. But we are going back to the Fallout universe. That of the video games, the TV show, the tabletop role-playing game, etc. And today, we have a bit of a special episode. For today, we are talking about the vault where it technically all began. The vault of the very first protagonist of the very first Fallout game. And that being Vault 13. Now, as some of you may already know about the lore, whether you just watched the TV show or just getting into Fallout, etc., you know that the company that created the vaults, Vault Tech, was not exactly the most ethical company on the planet. And if you know anything about the other vaults, they typically had something wrong with them, or they were part of some grander experiment that had variables that were influenced, twisted, in case to just simply test something, just to simply see what would happen. So a lot of you are probably wondering what this was. We'll get into it. So, Vault 13 itself is located in Southern California. Construction for the vault started on August 13th, 2063, and finally ended in March of 2069. It was designed to originally last for 10 years. Keep that in mind. The vault itself could support around 1,000 people, which doesn't exactly sound like much. That is basically just a really small town. But you have to remember, these are vaults. These are bunkers that are just buried underneath the ground or beneath mountains or piles of rock. The fact that it could support 1,000 people and do so well with food, water, etc. is actually pretty remarkable, especially when you consider that this wasn't just some hideaway. This was meant to survive the literal apocalypse. And not only could it do that, but also support 1,000 people while doing it. It's actually pretty impressive. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are just nipping at the bit. Get on with it. What is the great grand conspiracy for this vault? What is the secret experiment? What is the underlying variable that Vault Tech hid from these people when they signed up for this vault? Well, that's the funny thing. There isn't one. See, not all the vaults that Vault Tech made were these horrid conspiracies or these horrid unethical experiments. A couple of them were just control vaults, just simply bunkers built underground to see if people could just simply survive. And Vault 13 was one of these vaults. Granted, it was only designed to last for roughly around 10 years, but the reason for that is not quite exactly what you would think. It wasn't exactly designed to just fail after 10 years, like everything wasn't just going to shut down after 10 years, so to speak. But in reality, it was simply meant to last at least 10 years, because that's when Vault Tech theorized that the Enclave would be ready to repopulate the wastes with people uncontaminated by radiation. Now, if you don't know what the Enclave are, they honestly deserve their own video at one point, and I will get to that eventually, trust me. But long story short, they are essentially what they like to call the remnants of old America, descendants of people who escaped to an oil rig, outlasted the apocalypse, and now view all wastelanders, all ghouls, all mutants as essentially not people, and believe that they should be exterminated because of it, so that people uncontaminated by radiation, quote unquote, can repopulate the wastes and take back America. At least that's what they believe and think. There's a lot more to the Enclave than just that. I'm very much summarizing there, especially a lot of their history, but we don't have time for that right now. So, as I said, the vault was only designed to last for 10 years, However, the first Fallout game itself takes place in the year 2161. And if you'll remember, construction for the vault ended in 2063, and the war itself, the nuclear war that is, started in 2077. So this vault lasted much longer than it was originally supposed to. And we don't quite know why. At least I couldn't figure out why. Obviously, it wasn't designed to fail after 10 years, so probably just good upkeep kept it running for that long. But we don't know why the Enclave didn't come within that decade like originally planned. Maybe that wasn't the plan and Vault-Tec just assumed that that was how long it was going to take, or maybe something happened with the Enclave that kept them from getting there, or maybe they just didn't even know the vault was there, which honestly wouldn't surprise me. We don't know, and hopefully one day we'll find out. But prior to the date of December 5th, 2161, the water chip for Vault 13 malfunctions. And this is the starting point for Fallout 1. The Overseer, that being the leader of the vault, had sent several members of the vault out into the wastes in hope of finding a new water chip so that they could have purified, clean drinking water again. But all of them failed, never to be seen again. That is, until you come along. The protagonist of Fallout 1, simply known as the Vault Dweller. Now, I am going to get into a bit of spoilers for Fallout 1 here, so if you want to avoid that, click off, play the game, come back. Everyone all good? Fantastic. Eventually, you do succeed in finding a new water chip, and it works. However, with your Tales of the Wastes horrifying the Overseer, he sends you out to get rid of the super mutant threat once and for all so that your vault can live in peace. And you do. But when you get back, you're not given a hero's welcome. In fact, the Overseer tells you to leave. You see, he thinks people will follow you. After all, you left the vault. You went out into the wastes, and not only did you survive, but your tales, you've brought back tales of people who are out there, alive and well, who are descendants of people who didn't make it to vaults, and people are out there, and they're living. In fact, they're making small communities. Some places even have, like, law and order. The wasteland is not quite as dangerous as it was originally led to believe. In the vaults, many think it's just simply an uninhabited wasteland. But you're living proof to the contrary. And if you can make it out there, other people might too. And so he's worried that you'll convince people to leave. And so, the protagonist, the Vault Dweller, is kicked out of Vault 13.
Everyone will want to talk to you. Every youngster will look up to you and want to emulate you. And then what? They'll want to leave. What happens to the vault if we lose the best of a generation? What if we are the only safe place in the world? You just gave us back all these lives. I can't take the chance of losing them. I've made a lot of tough decisions since I took this position, but none of them harder than this one. You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Eventually, that Overseer that betrayed you is in fact assassinated. And the Vault Dwellers of Vault 13 build a supercomputer to be the new overseer of the vault, so to speak, even though they don't really keep the title of overseer. It's just a supercomputer now, but regardless. This new supercomputer allows Vault Dwellers to leave the vault if they so wish. And a few of them do. And they follow the Vault Dweller. And they eventually create a new community. And this community is where we start Fallout 2. An amazing story for an amazing vault. Funnily enough, the lore of the vault itself isn't necessarily what makes this story. It isn't the grand experiment that draws us into this vault. There's no underlying horrid experiment that happens. Instead, what drives us all to this vault is simply this is where it all began. This vault is borderline mythologized in the Fallout community, as it is, frankly, the whole reason why we have this franchise to begin with. And not only that, but it is strangely human. In this world where everything feels so 1950s and everything is all exaggerated and there's such out there exaggerated weapons, the story of betrayal and heroism of Vault 13 feels all too grounded. And in the end, maybe that's what drives some of us to it. But that is all we have for today. If you made it through this video and haven't played Fallout 1 yet, or at the very least haven't watched a playthrough of it or something, I highly recommend doing so. It is a truly beautiful and fantastic game. And while old, it is still an amazing experience. But that is all we have time for today. You are all free to go, and until next time. Hello again, class. It's good to see you all again. I apologize for not uploading this on a Monday like I typically try to do, but for some reason when I recorded my audio for this class, it just mysteriously disappeared when I went to go edit it. I couldn't find it anywhere. So that's why this is a day or two late, depending on when I get it out. But regardless, today we are going back to the Fallout universe, specifically kinda to Fallout 3. And today, we are talking of the horrifying legend of Vault 77. Now, if you don't know, Vault Tech is obviously sketchy in the Fallout universe. A lot of their vaults that were advertised as way for you and your family to survive the possible apocalypse were secretly tests for several different experiments for how people could survive given certain circumstances or certain variables, etc. And this one, Vault 77, was the test isolation, as Vault 77 only had a singular occupant. Now, a little prelude, a little warm-up here. The reason how we get this story is not quite from the games, but rather it was when Bethesda collaborated with Penny Arcade to create a webcomic to promote the release of Fallout 3 as it was coming out at the time. And they decided to focus on the sole dweller of Vault 77. Now, as we all know, the Great War started in 2077. The bombs fell, people rushed to the vaults, the door slammed behind the man. But he was the only one inside. We see him in the comic banging on the door, pleading for the doors to open back up. No one else got inside, it's just him. Everyone else is still stuck out there. But the vault never opens back up. And we can see 4 months later he's having a breakdown. The isolation definitely getting to him by this point. Perhaps a lot of survivor's guilt as well. Why him? Why was he the only one to make it in? Was it some kind of mistake? Did he do something wrong? You can only imagine what 4 months of complete and total isolation after such an event like this could do to somebody. And it wasn't until 1 year, 3 months, and 12 days into his isolation that he finally got a bit of reprieve. You see, the sole occupant of Vault 77 found a box of puppets. At first, they were a nice distraction, a way for him to talk to something, entertain himself perhaps, make little scenarios in his head. A nice little break from the boredom. However, 2 months into having these puppets, we see something rather dark start to form. They all seem to have their own distinct personalities that he's given them, and he starts to treat them as if they are at least somewhat real. Later on, after an unknown amount of time, we see the lone dweller walking past that box full of puppets again, except this time he realizes he forgot to take one out. But what's different about this one is that it's talking to him. Not a voice through him, but talking with its own voice. At least that's how he perceives it. We can see that through this, as he is surprised that it can talk, that while he maybe considers the puppets to be living things, he at the very least can tell that they cannot talk on their own and that they must talk through him. However, this one seems to be able to talk all on its own. And this puppet is a puppet of the Vault Boy mascot that we see throughout the Fallout games and the Fallout franchise as a whole. Later, a puppet that is a sort of king character gets quote-unquote murdered. Now, the sole occupant of Vault 77 thinks that it's the Vault Boy puppet that did it. However, the Vault Boy puppet not only accepts this and doesn't deny it, but says that the man also helped him. The man has no memory of this, but regardless, he and the Vault Boy puppet flee the vault, not wanting to be ousted by the other puppets or found out that he's secretly a murderer. So he and the Vault Boy puppet leave the vault, leaving all the other puppets behind. We see the man surviving in the wasteland, eventually taming and riding a giant red ant at one point even. However, at one point he does get kidnapped by a group of slavers. And while kidnapped, he's strangely not pleading for his life. He's not begging, "Oh, please let me go, please don't torture me, please don't kill me, please don't turn me into a slave," or anything like that. Instead, he's warning the slavers. Don't anger the puppet. It's crazy. You don't want to upset it, and so on and so forth. Now, the slavers, understandably, just kind of brush this guy off as being crazy and start debating on whether or not they're going to turn him into a slave or if they're just going to eat him. However, off screen, we see that the man broke free of his bonds, and that one of the two slavers that had kidnapped him is now dead. The other slaver goes back to his group, pleading with his fellow gang, saying that we ran into this guy, he killed the other one, I don't know if he followed me, I don't know where he is, I don't know if he's coming. And his fellow men start telling him, "You're crazy, like one guy did this, what could one guy do?" But then we hear clanging, possibly banging on a door or something of that nature, as the man simply says, "He's coming." And in the next panel we see that all the slavers are dead. The Vault Boy puppet is covered in blood on the man's hand as he has a crazed look in his eyes. Now, we can originally possibly write this comic off. Maybe it was just a promotional piece, not actually canon, or perhaps it kind of is, but it's just sort of told as a wasteland legend of sorts, of the one crazed Vault 77 dweller and his crazed puppet going around the wasteland and killing people as he goes. But one thing that adds quite a lot of credibility to the story is that you can actually find the Vault 77 jumpsuit in Paradise Falls in Fallout 3, with a holotape next to it saying to burn the jumpsuit when you get a chance.
Like I told you, man, I don't fucking know where it came from, but it freaks the boys out. Some story from a while back about a stranger with no name. Just Get rid of the damn thing. Ain't no good gonna come from keeping it around. Besides, if it is his, maybe he'll come back for it. Comprende?
Now, we don't really know how he lost his jumpsuit. Perhaps he was finally killed at some point and someone just kind of took it off of him. Maybe someone made it as a sort of testament to the legend. Or perhaps the Vault 77 dweller just simply took it off and exchanged it for something better to better suit the survivability of the wasteland. We don't really know, although I do hope we see more of him one day, whether that be in the Fallout TV show or in a future game. Only time will tell. But that's all for today's lesson. That is the legend of the Soul Dweller of Vault 77. What do you guys all think? Do you think this is just some legend of the wasteland told to children wastelanders by their parents to make them stay home and not stay out too late at night? Is he a ghostly bedtime story? Or, in the vast wastes of the Fallout universe, is there a sole occupant of a vault long gone crazy from isolation? Only time will tell, I suppose. But, until next time. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all again. Today, we're doing something just a little bit different, a little experiment, if you will. I want to see how it goes over with the rest of you. Today, we're not going over a specific internet horror story or an SCP or an old urban legend or anything like that. Today, we're going over some spooky video game lore. Now, if you like this sort of thing and want me to cover more spooky video game lore, whether it just be about the game we're speaking about today or any other games, please let me know and I'll be sure to make more of these. But for now, we are sticking to the Fallout franchise and something rather creepy, odd, and unnerving that happened inside the doors of Vault 108. Now, if you're new to the Fallout franchise or haven't even heard of it before, basically it is a post-apocalyptic world that primarily centers around its video games, although there are other bits of media such as the Amazon Prime show coming out soon, where basically a war known as the Great War happened, and this was a nuclear war that essentially destroyed the world. However, there were a few vaults in the US where a few people were able to escape and a few people were able to survive throughout the next coming decades and centuries. Now, some of these were control vaults and didn't have anything strange or weird happening with them, and people just simply lived and survived in them. However, most of them had secret experiments that were the secret purpose of these vaults, done by the company called Vault Tech, where they told almost nobody about these experiments, especially not the people that they had go into the vaults, no. And today, we are speaking specifically, as I said, about Vault 108. Now, 475 people managed to make it to Vault 108 just before the bombs dropped. However, unlike most vaults where the positions were either pre-filled out before anyone even arrived, or they would be decided upon by the staff, or they would be registered beforehand, only 4 positions in this vault were actually fulfilled upon the people entering, that being the Overseer, which is basically the leader of the vault, the Chief of Staff, the Chief of Security, and the Morale Officer. Now, this was possibly the experiment that the Overseer actually knew about, to see what would happen if these positions weren't filled by default, if people were chosen by a specific individual to do a specific job, whether they maybe wanted to or not. Now, the vault ran like this for 40 months. That's several years after the doors closing. But after these 40 months, the overseer, the leader of the vault, died of cancer. So that leaves the question, who was to be the next one? Now you see, the researchers for this vault specifically chose him as the overseer because they knew he was going to die. And this was perhaps the real experiment, to see what would happen if the leader, who perhaps maybe wronged a few people or had to micromanage everything, suddenly disappeared. And because he was gone, there was no clear line of succession. Who was to be the next vault overseer? Nobody knew the answer. Nobody. And nobody knew what to do. However, many vault people saw a chance. They saw a chance to perhaps change their lives, get a change in leadership so things could be maybe a bit more fairly. Maybe some vault people didn't want that, though. Maybe some liked their positions of power. Maybe some liked the positions they were given and didn't want a change in power or a change in status quo. And because of all this all led to a civil war within the vault. Now, we can tell that this was most likely planned and expected by Vault-Tec, as the vault has been stocked with 3 times the amount of weapons and ammunition and such that vaults were typically stocked with. Because of this massive civil war with all these weapons that people just had such easy access to, all it really ended up doing was causing a population shortage within the vault. Nothing was really able to be changed, unfortunately. However, because of this population shortage, and because of the lack of the workforce they now had, they had to resort to something that not many other vaults had the capability of doing: cloning. See, the researchers found a cloning machine that the vault had, and so they decided to clone who they thought was the most intelligent, the most worthy, like the most well-rounded person that they could get to help fill out any general job that they needed. And so they cloned a man named Gary. However, this clone wasn't at all like the Gary that they cloned him from. He was highly, highly aggressive, not necessarily physically. However, he would be angry constantly. Whenever he saw the researchers, he would get aggressive and such. And also, strangely enough, he could only say one word, that being his own name, Gary. Now, this clone was obviously deemed a failure due to his aggression and lack of proper speech, so they moved him to the observation room. And so they decided that perhaps something went wrong in the cloning process, or it was just a simple bad luck of the draw. They decided to make another clone. However, unfortunately, just like the first one, this clone was once again highly aggressive and could only say his own name, so he was also moved to the observation room. However, curiously enough, the clones weren't aggressive towards each other. In fact, they were quite friendly, and even stranger still, they could communicate with each other. Now again, they were only saying their own name of Gary. However, the tones would fluctuate as if giving context to how they were talking, and it seemed that they could very well easily communicate with each other. Now, this was strange, but this didn't quite make the scientists stop, as they were determined to fix their population issue so they could hopefully get the vault back on track. So they made more clones and more, trying to just simply get something right so they could increase their population. But no matter what they did, no matter what variable they changed, it always ended up the same. The clone being highly aggressive and only saying his own name. Now, this continued all the way up until the 54th clone that they made. Now, once again, highly aggressive, could only say his own name. However, this one physically showed his aggression as he attacked one of the scientists. And this finally got the scientists to give up and stop the cloning process. Now, these vaults, while many of them were experiments, were designed to legitimately last several decades, very long periods of time with no repairs really needed unless something specific went wrong. However, this vault's power was made to stop after just 20, perhaps part of this experiment as well, to see how many things could go wrong with people being able to adjust. And the backup generator for this vault could only power part of the vault, not the entire thing. And one of the places that wasn't fully powered was the observation room where they left all the clones. Now, because of this, the Garys break out, and the remaining citizens of the vault can't defend themselves because all the weapons were used up in the Civil War. And so, many vault dwellers were killed, many fled, and many were sealed behind places in the vault never to be opened again in fear for their lives, seemingly now dead, unfortunately. If anyone did make it out and survive, it's never given to us. Now, 180 years later, when the game Fallout 3 takes place, we can go to this vault, and we see that there are still some Garys around. We don't know how or why this is, as perhaps the cloning process gives you extended life, perhaps. However, they are still able to be killed by small arms, melee weapons, etc. However, another eerie thing can be revealed for those who explore this vault entirely. Inside the cloning lab, there is a Gary studying the corpse of a wastelander. Now, we don't know why he was doing this. Perhaps he was just simply curious, looking over a body for some reason. Perhaps the clone was getting ready to make it into a food source for him and his fellow clones. Or perhaps they're trying to figure out the cloning process for themselves. After all, after 180 years, we can see that there's actually only 12 clones left alive. Perhaps they're trying to replenish their numbers somehow. We don't know for sure, though. Now, the only other place that we can find another Gary outside of Vault 108 is Gary number 23, who might have been kidnapped by a group called the Outcasts. We don't know if he was kidnapped or he found their signal over a radio or through his Pip-Boy. Again, we're not sure. Now, the Outcasts did try to use this Gary as a soldier or something. However, they ended up having to kill him because, again, the Garys are only friendly towards each other, and he was highly aggressive. And, unfortunately, that's all we know about this vault. All we know is that the original inhabitants of the vault are long gone by now, and that all that remains are the Garys. And we have no idea what their plans were inside that vault, or how close they truly were until we came along. But perhaps that is for the best. Now, once again, be sure to let me know if you guys like this sort of thing. I'd love to cover more spooky video game lore, whether it be on Fallout or any other video games, so be sure to let me know. And if you like this, I'll be sure to cover more. But until next time,